Hello all, welcome to oratrainings.com. In this Oracle database programming session, we'll discuss about PLSQL procedure. Let us get into the objectives of this particular session. After completing this particular session, you should be able to understand what are the subprograms, what are the benefits of subprograms, and the different environments from which a subprogram can be invoked, and how do we create, how do we invoke, as well as how do we drop a procedure, various parameter passing methods, as well as how do we handle exception in procedures. So let us get into the next slide. So what is a subprogram? So far we have used the concept of anonymous block and we have written a good amount of samples in that. But now this is another concept called subprogram. So what is a subprogram? It is a named PLSQL block that can accept parameters and can be invoked from a calling environment. So the first difference between an anonymous block as well as a named PLSQL block is nothing but anonymous block does not have a name, but a named PLSQL block, nothing but a subprogram, will have a name and it is stored in database and it will also have parameter and which can be invoked from third-party environment. It can be, let us say, you can invoke this particular subprogram from Java, Python, Perl, C, many other places you can invoke this particular subprogram. And there are two types of subprogram. One is procedure, another is function. Both have a similar capabilities, but we'll be using procedure when you want to perform a business logic or nothing but when you want to perform an action, and generally use a function when you want to compute a particular value. Okay, and other difference also we have between procedure and a function. A procedure cannot be invoked in a select query, but a function can be invoked in a select query. That's another difference, and it is based on a standard PLSQL block structure. Every procedure or a function will have a set of blocks like the declare, begin, exception, as well as end section. And what is the need of this program is like it provides the functionality like when you design any business logic, it will be modularity. It provides modularity, nothing but like you can write a particular set of sections like each block will perform a particular functionality and reusability. It doesn't need to write the same code every time. The other particular calling environment can simply invoke a set of code which they require, so that it doesn't need to rewrite their logic, and you can extend extend the functionality, and it is easy for the maintenance also. And also it does have a set of securities privileges, nothing but for a given particular schema you can stop the privilege of the execution or you can allow them to execute it. There are a number of other advantages we have using a subprogram. Okay, next slide. So what is the block structure of PLSQL program? It is similar to the normal anonymous block. The only thing is you have a header section here, nothing but the declare section. In the header part, you have the create or a replace procedure and procedure name. The remaining is as it is, like a begin, exception, as well as end. And we just need to mention. So this is the syntax for the subprogram syntax, nothing but either for the procedure or a function, the same syntax will applicable. The header part will be a little bit different for both of them. So what is a procedure? A procedure is a type of a subprogram. That is what we discussed. Like there are two types of subprogram. One is procedure, other is a function. And a procedure is one of the subprogram which performs an action. It will get stored in the database in a particular schema, and we use it for the purpose of repeated execution. And the syntax part is like we have to mention create or replace. Or replace is not mandatory, but you can also use it if at all if you want to replace the existing code. Procedure, and we have to mention the procedure name, the user defined procedure name. Parameters are not mandatory. If at all if you're mentioning a parameter, you have to mention parameter name, mode, as well as data type. Mode is also not mandatory. You can just mention parameter as well as data type. You can either use is or as, and the remaining PLSQL block, nothing but the it doesn't need to mention the declare keyword, but declaration section will be there. Here if you observe the previous slide, so you don't have the declare keyword, but you have a declaration section. Okay, and the remaining sections begin, exception, and end section. Okay, now coming to next slide. So what happens when you create a procedure, right? So before proceeding further, let us write a simple sample and then we proceed further. Okay, so okay, first procedure dot SQL. I'm going with a SQL extension only as of now. So if it is an anonymous block, what we do, we declare begin and end, right? So now when you're writing a procedure, this declare section will not be there. Instead of declare section, we have create or replace. Okay, I'll not use replace now. I'll just say create or we create procedure name, right? XX. I'll just say XX first PROC, and I'm not mentioning any parameter, and I just mention is. Okay, and the remaining is not required. I'll just simply mention a null. Okay, now before executing this one, what I want to do is I'll just open one more worksheet. Okay, so any database object, whenever you create using your DDL command, that will be available in the all underscore object table, right? So select star from all underscore objects, where object name, make sure that you provide an uppercase. Just check out. Yeah. So there is no database object with this XX first underscore procedure, PROC. Now I'll just compile, right? So how do you compile? How do you, yeah, this is how you can compile, right? So this is just getting compilation. So even though it shows run, right? Even though it shows run, it is not getting executed. It is getting compiled only. It is getting only compiled. So here, if you observe, just try to re-execute this one, right? So this procedure just got created now. This procedure just got created now. And also observe one more table, all underscore source, where name is equal to, right? You could see all the source code of your program available in the all underscore source table. Okay. Now, so as of now, I have not provided any business logic in this, right? So let me provide a business logic. If you don't provide null, just see what will happen. Can you see? Now, first thing, what is happening here? We have not provided or replace. If you're trying to recreate, it says that this particular database object is already available. So first of all, what we have to provide? We have to provide or replace. Okay. Now try to re-execute. Okay. Now just clear the log first of all, because it is not giving the proper log, right? Okay. It says error, right? It is just saying errors. But what are the errors? We could not find out. So what you can do is you can just see show error. Okay. Now here, if you see what it is telling, encounter symbol and declare exit for go to flow null mod pragma. So it is not giving a proper error actually. But as per our understanding from the earlier program, as per the understanding of any PLSQL block, or any block generally always require one statement. Any block in PLSQL always require a statement. So I'll just write a simple statement. From the error, it is difficult to find out in some scenarios. Okay, it is difficult to find out the main reason. Okay, but let us write this one and just see here. Okay, now it says no errors, right? It says no errors. It got compiled. And just try to re-execute this all underscore object and check out the status also. This all underscore object will also have a status saying that status is valid. If the status is incompiled, nothing will let us say. I'll just try to recompile, and now it got an error. And if you try to see the status, of this program, if it is invalid, it means that it is not available for execution. Nothing but your program is available in the database, but it is not available for the execution. Nothing but the third party environment cannot invoke your program. And just see the latest source code. Yes, latest source code will always be available in the database whenever you compile. Can you see? Without semicolon, it is still available. Okay, now I'll just change this program. Nothing but I'll add up the remaining code so that it will be successfully compiled, right? No errors. And try to see now, and the status should be valid. Okay, now we can see the latest code in this table. Yep. Now this is how we can create a procedure. It is not execution. This is a just creation of procedure. But how do you execute? So there are multiple ways. So one of the way where we can execute a procedure is using exec command. Mention exec command and mention the procedure name. Okay. So now I'll just clear my DBMS output logic. Now just execute this one, select this text and control enter. Can you see? Now it says anonymous block completed and it got the statement from our program. Okay, this is one way of execution. What is the other ways? What you can do is you just open another worksheet. You can just simply write begin, end, okay, and then write the procedure name. Okay, this is another way. This is another way of executing the procedure. Now also anonymous block completed. Okay, now let's get back to our slide. So when we created a procedure, what happened? It got stored in the database table. Okay, and when you create a procedure, first thing what we have done, we have compiled and then we executed. So the compilation step, what it will do, it will compile the source code and it will generate a P code. As of now, we are able to see the actual source code as a developer wrote, right? So whatever the source code we have written, it was available in the underscore source table. What I'm telling about a P code. This particular P code is not available for a developer. It will be stored internally, and this particular P code will be used by the database engine for the purpose of execution whenever you're trying to invoke it. Okay, now so we just saw a simple sample, right? Like how do you execute exec followed by procedure name. Now we can pass a parameter also. We'll see the different set of samples but later on. Yeah, so here if you observe, what are we doing? We are passing a parameter name, p underscore name, data type is varchar2, and we have a temp number. We're just simply printing hello p name. So whenever you pass this one hello world procedure name with a parameter, you'll get the appropriate hello message, right? Now, so in this one we're trying to use a, a SQL query to get the department name based on the provided department number. So here what we have done, we declare two variables, department name, location, and we're trying to retrieve two values from this particular table, departments table, based on the department number, and then we're printing it, and we're passing a department number to print the value. Okay, so we'll try to have another sample based on the parameter as well as based on a particular SQL query, based on a SQL query. Okay, now I'll just say procedure with params, okay, dot SQL. Now what we want to do, we want to fetch out, we want to fetch the employee details based on the employee number. Okay, so I'll try to use a table called select star from per people X. I'll use this one table, and based on the employee number, I want to fetch the employee details. So I'll say person ID, full name, employee number, and what are the other things? Okay, email address. Okay, these are the some of the columns. I'll passing employee number as an input. Okay, I'll pass like this, employee number is equal to, it should be a varchar, so better you pass in the single quotes. Okay, so now what is happening, when you're passing employee number, you're getting these number of data. Okay, so instead of employee number, I prefer to use person ID. Okay, there could be some issue. I'll just say person ID is equal to 5. Based on person ID, I want to pull the other information. I'll just say employee, because employee number depends upon the org also. That is why we are not passing org. So better to pass a person ID as of now to get the employee details. So we'll try to fetch 3 columns based on the person ID. Okay, now this is our query. So how do we write it? Create, better to use a replace, but when you're trying to use a replace, make sure that you're not overriding the existing code. So how do you find out if you have a procedure name, procedure with the same name? What you can do, create a replace procedure x6 get person details. So what you can do is, before writing any logic, you can just copy your procedure name. Before executing your logic, just check out all underscore in the all underscore object table. Just check out whether you have any object name with this particular name. If it is not available, then you're good to create with the same name. Okay, procedure name, and what you want to pass? You want to pass p underscore person underscore id. What is the name? Data type number. It is number is and begin and end, right? So we can follow this particular syntax rule always. Better mention the your block name also. This is my block name, and now just get out, take your query and declare the parameters. First of all, v underscore emp number varchar2 v underscore f name varchar2 150. What is the other one? So it seems all are varchar, right? Email varchar2. Okay, I think my parenthesis is not working properly. Okay. Now, what's the next thing? Write the implicit cursor. What are we doing? We are using an implicit cursor now, and pass the person ID. Okay, p underscore person ID. Always make sure that your parameter starts with p underscore. Okay, p underscore nothing but parameter underscore, and use the into clause. Mention the parameters now, right? Mention the parameters. First is employee number, vf name, v underscore email. Okay. So far I think create a replace procedure, p underscore person ID is, and we mentioned the variable names, and we have used the begin section, and that's it, right? Okay, let's compile. Seems it got stuck, but 1 minute. Yep. So it got compiled, and check out the status here in the all underscore object table. It is still executing. Yeah. So for time being, what I can do is I can still write the anonymous block execution logic, or maybe we can directly invoke it also. Either way is fine. Pass the person ID. Okay, and just execute. It may not print anything because we have not written any logic, right? So there is nothing. It is not printing anything. Okay. Yep. Can you see? Status is valid. It is not printing anything because there is no logic we have written inside the procedure to print it. So better to write a logic so that you'll understand your procedure is working fine. Employee number. Write two more. V underscore F name, V underscore email. Full name, email. Okay. Now just save your program better. It got compiled. Now just execute and see whether it will print the data or not. Right? We got the data. It is printing properly. Okay. Now let us say I'll just pass a junk employee number, nothing but I'll just pass 0. I hope there is no employee with the person ID 0, and see what will happen. Now what it is telling, it's saying that no data found, and it is also providing at line number 8. Okay, 6512 at line number 8, 6512 at line number 2, and some other number, no data found. Just go with the first one, line number 8. So at line number 8, what is happening? So line number 8 is this one, right? Okay, just remove this. Okay, just remove this query and see what is the line number 8. Can you see the select query? Because like our program started with line number 1, right? So Now at line number 8, it clearly mentioned, okay, there is some issue at your line number 8, nothing but this query is the issue. So here, if you remember, whenever you write any implicit cursor, if the query is not returning any data, obviously it will get into no data found exception. To trap this exception, what you have to do, when others then, you have to mention, okay, there is some issue in your parameter, just please pass the valid employee number, will mention. Please provide valid employee number. Like this, you have to trap the program. So now just here, compile. Okay, you have to mention exception block, right? Exception when others then. Try to recompile. Cool, it got compiled. Now try to re-execute and see what will happen, whether it will display the DBMS output, whether it will get into exception. Can you see? Now it got completed successfully. See, invocation should not fail. Whenever you get an exception, what will happen is your invocation will fail. Nothing but the third party program cannot understand why your program got error. Your program should end in your program, even though your program is having error, you have to clearly mention to the third party system why your program got errored out. You should not give standard errors, right? If you give a standard error, they cannot make it out why you got an error. But now here they can easily make out, okay, there is some issue with the employee number, so they can try to validate what is the issue. Okay, the spelling wrong. Yep. Okay, I'll recompile. Now we can try to re-execute. Okay, yeah, so this is how we can write a program procedure with a parameter logic also. Yep. So before proceeding further, yeah, so now we'll come to the actual parameter concept in the procedure. So here just now we just considered, we just created a procedure with one parameter. Okay, what do you call that parameter? So there are two types, there are, the parameter, whenever we discuss with the parameter, we just have a theoretical concept called formal parameter as well as actual parameter. So formal parameter is nothing but the parameter name which you declare in the procedure. So in our case here, if you observe in this procedure, p underscore person ID is the formal parameter, and this particular one, this 0, is called actual parameter. Even though I passed a value, let us say what I'll do is I'll just do a different way now. V underscore, yeah, V underscore PID number colon is equal to 0. Now V underscore PID. So this V underscore PID is the actual parameter. Okay, it's a formal parameter as well as actual parameter. That's the difference. Okay, now what are the different ways you can pass the parameters? Nothing but you have a procedure, and how many ways I can pass the values to your parameters. One is using a positional parameter concept, other one is using a named parameter concept, other one is using a mixed parameter concept. Okay, so here if you observe, earlier I just passed the value directly, right? I just pass the value directly. This is one way of passing a parameter. Other way of passing a parameter is like this. Okay, this is one way. Instead of replacing code, I'll just make it available here. Okay, this is one way. And what is the other way? V underscore PID is one other way. There is another way also. So here what do you require? So whenever you have a larger number of parameters in procedure, always mention your parameter name as well as value. This is one of the very good way of passing the parameter. So you just need to mention is equal to arrow mark and the parameter name or a value. Either way it will work. So now just see, it has to execute 3 times. Can you see? It got executed 3 times. So here in this one, either you can mention like this, right? You can mention value or other one. So now it will it has to execute 4 times. Got it? So these are number of ways you can pass the parameter to the program. Okay, positional parameter, named parameter as well as mixed one. Now, so the parameter mode. So as of now, when we created a procedure, when we mention a parameter for the procedure, we have not considered what is the mode to be considered, but that is a default mode. So why does this plays a crucial role? What is the necessity of parameter modes in the PLSQL? So we have 3 types of modes. One is in, out, as well as in out. So in is nothing but you're passing a parameter for only input purpose. What means that you're specifying a parameter for the output purpose. Nothing but the calling program should receive the response. Nothing but in the sample, We are trying to print the value, but that doesn't make any sense actually. What is the purpose of printing it? The calling program should retrieve the values. If you just print it, who will read it, right? It's not like you are, as of now, I'm just printing the information in the log, but that is not the actual way of writing the program, because this is a sample program we have been right. We are trying to enhance it in a certain way that, like your calling program can read the values. Okay. What are the subprogram you write it? It is for the purpose of a calling program, nothing but like you may have a Java code, or you may have a VBCS code, or you may have an Apex code, which will invoke your procedure, and they use it those values for the other purpose of execution. So now in those scenarios, you have to provide the output parameters. Okay. So now here, if you observe the properties of the output parameter, out parameter, I mean, so first thing is you have to mention whether any parameter, whether you want to consider an out, you have to clearly mention that. That is the first thing. And this out will be called to the, it will be returned to the calling environment. And other thing is, it is an uninitialized value. It is an uninitialized variable, nothing but it will not have any value at all, and it should be a variable, and it cannot be assigned a default value. You cannot assign a default value. Okay. But coming to the procedure, it is a default mode. If you don't mention any mode for a parameter, that will be considered as default mode. Value is passed into subprogram, nothing but you are passing a value to the procedure using this in parameter. And we have seen formal parameter acts as a constant also. An actual parameter can be a literal expression. We have seen all these things can be assigned a default value also. Okay. And in out here, if you observe, it is almost similar to the out logic. Okay. But it'll act as both, nothing but you can consider that parameter, like you can pass input parameter using that particular variable, and also you can retrieve the value from that particular parameter also. I mean, it's a parameter. You can have a value, you can have a value to be passed using the same parameter, as well as you can retrieve the output also using the same parameter. Okay. So in generally, like you'll be using all kind of parameter modes, either it can be in out or in out. Okay. Now we'll try to have a out logic, like we'll try to create the same procedure using out logic, nothing but the parameter, the one which will create this procedure, right? What we'll do is, instead of printing these three values in the output in this particular DBMS output console, we'll try to pass these three variable names to the calling environment. Okay. So I'll just copy the same program. Okay. Open a new worksheet. Okay. So I'll just say, I'll just name with this version 2. Okay. V2. Even, and it also supports overloading. Even if you don't change the program name, but if you change the parameter name, this will still work. Okay. But I don't want to consider that as of now. Later on, we can understand the overloading concept. Okay. So what all we want to do? Person IDs in I want to mention. It is always better to mention explicitly. Okay. And what is other one? P underscore emp number. So when you're mentioning varchar2, you should not mention size in the parameter mode, in the parameter place. V underscore f name varchar2, p underscore email, varchar. So we have to mention out. Okay. If you don't mention out, it will consider it as in by default. Out. And I don't think where this are required as of now, right? You can directly simply mention into p underscore logic. It doesn't need to mention like this. P underscore. Okay. And now what we can do is, this is also not required. Actually, generally we write DBMS output for the purpose of debugging purpose. Okay. I'll just remove this logic as of now. So for our debugging purpose, what we can do is, so I'll just say, I'll keep a set of statements for our debugging purpose. So I'll say entered procedure with emp number. Generally, like when you're designing a program for the initial purpose, we always need to understand like how the parameters are getting passed, what is the return value. It is better to print them later on. If your program is so successful, if it is valid, and like if it has passed the test, then you can remove the logs and you can just keep only the appropriate logs. Okay. So I just mentioned this one, and yeah, that's fine. Okay. Now just compile. Okay. It's got stuck, seems. No. Okay, got it. Okay, now we have one parameter in as well as three parameter out. Okay, now so the execution method for this one will differ. Okay, so let me save this code first of all, the snippet. I'll say invoke this one. Okay, invoke this one, and I'll open another worksheet. And so I'll say invoke this one. Okay, so you can better to copy this to your signature, and you'll understand you should not miss any parameter. Okay, declare, we require declare section also because you are having a output parameters. So now this is my procedure name, just remove this create name now. Okay, now declare the variables. Okay, how many variables we require? Either you can have a 3 or 4. Okay, but better to have 4. PID number, v underscore emp number varchar 150. Okay, so I'll just, okay, v underscore f name, v underscore email. Okay, now what we can do, so v underscore PID, v underscore PID, just map like this. This is a better way of mapping always. This is one of the best way. Okay, but you can follow your convention, whichever you feel comfortable, you can follow that. So this way, what will happen is you will not mistakenly map some other variable to another variable. Okay, this way you can easily identify, okay, to which variable I'm mapping which variable. Okay, this is how we have to map. Okay, I have a formatting properly. Yep. Now we can write the printing. Now let us say if you want to print, what we can do, I'll just copy my DBMS printing stuff. So it doesn't need to rewrite. V underscore emp name, v underscore f name. Yep. Okay, let's try. So in the declare section, we declared 4 variables and we have passed the parameters appropriately. So now VPID should be passed and the remaining 3 parameters should be provided by the calling program. XX get person details version 2 has to provide the values. Okay, let's see that what will happen now. Okay, now here if you observe what is happening, please provide a valid employee number because we have not provided any employee number. So it would have passed null actually, right? So now what you can do is let us provide a valid value here. Okay, now let us try to execute. Okay, see, got it? Entered procedure with person number 5 or person ID 5. It should be person ID, not employee number, person ID 5, and we got the employee details, right? So you can also have a appropriate exception handling. Let us say if you're passing an invalid employee number, invalid person ID, you can set all the values of all the variable values to null or maybe some other values. Okay, you can have a different way of exception handling scenarios. Now coming back, so we have seen different set of parameters, right? And if you're considering in out, right? So now if it is in out, the only difference is you can consider it as an input as well as output, the combination. Okay, now coming to the next one. So we have seen this example already, like how different ways we can pass the parameter. Okay, so positional parameter, named parameter as well as mixed one. So positional means like you can just pass the values directly. Named means you can mention the parameter name as well as then the value, and the mixer means like combination. Here if you observe, here they just pass the values here and then they mention the parameter name also. Okay, so how do we invoke? We have just seen this one, invoking a procedure. And exception handling, we have seen it. How do you can handle exception? So here if you observe, this is a little bit a different scenario. What is the example there was, like we want to convey here is I have two procedure, selection like selected employee as well as print details. So in this one, what are we trying to do? We are trying to print hello followed by the employee name. We're trying to print hello followed by the employee name. And what are we doing? We are calling this procedure name. We are calling this select employee from the print details. Okay. Now here, if you observe, this is a implicit cursor. So let us say if you're not passing the proper employee number, what will happen? Your program will error out. So how does the exception handling, like now let us say if there is any, like how does the exception handling considered in this kind of scenario? That is what I want to explain. Okay. So let me show you that. So now let us say if you're trying to call print details. Now what is the second procedure name? It is a print detail. The first one is select employee. So there are four cases can be considered if you don't have a proper exception handling. Nothing but what will happen? Let us say the case one, both does not have the exception handling. What will happen? The exception will be passed to the executing environment. Nothing but whoever is calling, like let us say from Java program, your program is getting called, or from other PLSQL program, your procedure is getting called, or maybe from the Apex, your program is getting called. So based on that, it will be appropriately, the calling program will handle the exception. Next one is, let us say the print details is having exception handling. So what will happen? From the print details, we are calling the select EMP procedure, and print details is having the exception handling. What will happen? The print details will capture the exception stuff, right? And now the third case, only the select employee is having the exception handling. What will happen? The exception will be handled by the SEL EMP. I think the selected employee one will handle the exception. Let us say the fourth case, what will happen if when both have the exception handling? When both have the exception handling, see the basic dumb rule or a thumb rule, sorry, the basic thumb rule for the exception handling is it will always reach the nearest exception block. It will always reach the nearest exception block. If your SEL EMP procedure is having the exception handling, what will happen? The nearest block will be SEL EMP because that is where the exception, there is a chance of exception. That is where it will handle it. Okay. Now coming to the next slide, how do we drop it? Any object whichever you create in a PLSQL or a database overall, you always have a drop concept of that. Nothing but you can create an object as well as you can drop an object. So how do you drop it? You just need to mention drop procedure and procedure name. This is how we can drop it. But be cautious when you're dropping any object because it is not retrievable, right? Like it's auto commit. So better that like make sure that take a backup, or if you're aware you have to drop it, then drop it. Okay, but be careful. And now coming to the final slide summary. So what we have done, what all we have learned, we have understood how do you create it, how do you invoke it, how do you drop it, how do you mention the parameter, what are the different modes you can mention it, as well as how do you handle the exception. So this is all about procedures in the PL SQL. Thank you.